Most people have heard the headlines: sales slumps, plummeting stock prices, and bailout rumors swirling around major car brands. But beneath the surface, an even bigger storm is brewing, one that threatens to reshape the automotive world in ways we've never seen. It's not just about Tesla's very public slump or the endless headlines about electric car controversies. It's about a fundamental shift in the way we think about driving, financing, and even living. Right now, there's a perfect storm of trade wars, mass layoffs, questionable lending practices, and consumer frustration. Put together, they point toward a crisis that will leave entire companies on the edge of bankruptcy. If you thought the drama with Tesla's tumbling stock price was intense, buckle up, because there's a lot more going on with other manufacturers, and much of it has stayed out of the mainstream spotlight until now. From legendary brands losing favor with consumers to previously unknown electric car makers rising with shocking speed, the entire industry is teetering on a knife's edge. And even if you don't consider yourself a car person, the ripples of this crisis could affect your wallet, your commute, and your future. There's never been an era quite like this, where politics, technology, and personal finance all collide with a crash loud enough to shake entire corporations. Consumers are getting a front row seat to see how big automakers respond, or fail to respond, to the new realities of inflation, constrained supply chains, and changing lifestyle preferences. But the truly worrying part, it's not just one region or one type of car. We're looking at a global phenomenon. What's happening in America is eerily mirrored in Europe, Asia, and beyond. In some places, the downfall is being accelerated by newly emerging electric manufacturers. In others, it's an aging population that can't justify shelling out for a brand new sedan or SUV. Yet while each story has its own flavor, one fact remains universal. Major automotive names once thought untouchable are now stumbling. And at the center of it all is a mounting pile of debt, an identity crisis, and a consumer base caught in the crossfire. So how did we get here? And what happens next? Let's explore. To understand why the auto world feels like it's on the brink, we need to look at how quickly consumer sentiment has shifted in just the last few years. Once upon a time, owning a car was a point of pride, your ticket to freedom on the open road. Whether you loved roaring V8s or the silent torque of electric motors, it was all about escaping everyday life and embracing the thrill of travel. Nowadays, though, that sense of excitement is being replaced by a creeping dread over interest rates, inflation, and ballooning loan payments. There was a time when people financed cars for 3 or 4 years, back when the average model cost far less and wages could cover the difference. But as prices inched higher and wages lagged behind, dealers realized they could keep the party going by offering longer loan terms. 5-year terms became 6, and 6 turned into 7. It was a can kick down a perilously long road, and consumers jumped on board because in many parts of America, it's basically impossible to function without a car. By now, a staggering percentage of new vehicle purchases are tied to loans, many with high monthly payments that stretch over half a decade or more. Worse still, dealerships got creative. Rather than insisting on a fresh down payment, many allowed buyers to roll the outstanding debt on their old car into a shiny new one. The allure of a brand new SUV was too tempting to refuse. For a while, this seemed like a magic trick. As long as the used car market was strong, you could trade in your half paid off vehicle for an impressive amount, turning that equity into your next ride. But that golden period was short. Today, used car prices have come down, and the capital that flooded into the market during the pandemic, along with stimulus checks and low interest deals, has dried up. Now there are millions of Americans who are underwater on their car loans, making it almost impossible to escape the monthly bills without an even larger financial hit. It's a situation nobody wants to be in, and it's only getting worse. Of course, it's tempting to assume Tesla is the only one facing consumer backlash or investor panic. After all, the brand's stock price plummeted by more than 50% from its peak, fueling endless tweets and debates. But let's not be deceived by the spotlight. Many established car makers, from regional powerhouses to global icons, are quietly grappling with existential threats. In Europe, companies are tightening belts, downsizing factories, or pushing half-baked electrification plans just to keep up with new emissions rules. In the US, manufacturing giants are battling worker dissatisfaction and cost pressures from advanced technology that only a limited portion of the population can afford. Meanwhile, in China, state-supported EV makers are pumping out cars at prices that embarrass foreign competitors. The trade wars, and yes, they're as real as they sound, add another level of unpredictability. Tariffs on raw materials, along with difficulty sourcing vital components, are causing production delays and skyrocketing costs that inevitably get passed to the consumer. It's worth noting too that many of these brands are hemorrhaging cash, even though they're still producing vehicles. On the surface, it might look like business as usual, a new SUV or truck model on the showroom floor, elaborate marketing campaigns extolling new connectivity features or luxury comfort. Yet behind corporate doors, frantic strategy meetings revolve around how to reduce supply chain risks and whether it's even worth competing on entry-level models anymore. Some have altogether abandoned the idea of affordable vehicles, choosing to focus on higher margin premium lines. The result? A gap that grows every year between what brands are offering and what the average consumer can realistically pay. The pivot to premium or die has worked for a subset of wealthier buyers, but it doesn't fix the deeper rot, which is that most people simply don't have that kind of disposable income. This brings us to the heart of the debt issue. When customers can't afford their own cars, manufacturers can't hit their revenue targets. The industry's entire financial structure has historically leaned on consistent high-volume sales. Normally, people would buy or lease a new car every 3 to 5 years, but that model starts to crumble if you extend loan terms to 7 years or more, because it leaves fewer returning buyers in the pipeline. And if you can't entice new customers with cheaper models, or at least something different, your brand slides toward obsolescence. During the pandemic, the used car market gave many companies a temporary lifeline. Supply chain disruptions meant fewer new cars on the lot, so used vehicles became hot commodities. People even found themselves in the bizarre situation where a car they bought a few years prior was suddenly worth as much, if not more, than they originally paid. It created a frenzy of upside-down transactions and short-term gains. But like most financial bubbles, it inevitably popped. Dealers now find themselves with sprawling lots of used cars they can't sell at last year's prices, while manufacturers continue cranking out new models that need to be moved off the assembly line. Add to this the rising interest rates that make monthly payments more expensive and tighten overall credit conditions, and you get a recipe for disaster. Some insiders whisper about what could happen if all this debt goes bad and people start defaulting in waves. Others point to the possibility of government intervention in the form of special financing guarantees or corporate mergers that sound suspiciously like forced marriages. Yet even those emergency measures might not bridge the gap, especially if younger buyers keep rejecting the burden of long-term auto loans altogether. If you want a crash course in how dire the situation can get, just look at the rumored near insolvency of Nissan. The brand once boasted some of the world's most iconic models, but years of questionable decisions have pushed it closer to the edge. For a while, Nissan offered extremely generous financing, pushing new sedans and SUVs into the hands of just about anyone who could fog a mirror. They also relied heavily on bulk sales to rental fleets, an approach that, while it moves volume, floods the used market with a glut of late-model cars after a couple of years, tanking resale values. But Nissan took things even further by guaranteeing certain buybacks in specific markets, assuming their vehicles would retain enough value to make the arrangement profitable. That worked out during the heyday when used car prices spiked, but as those prices come back down to earth, Nissan finds itself potentially stuck with hundreds of thousands of vehicles worth less than they agreed to pay. Japanese government officials attempted to broker a merger between Nissan and Honda, presumably to salvage the workforce and the brand's core technologies. However, Honda, enjoying healthier sales, better quality perception, and a more robust financial position, seemed to view the deal as a no-win arrangement. As negotiations collapsed, insiders claimed it marked the death knell for Nissan's independence. While that might not spell doom in the immediate sense, it's a flashing neon warning about the kinds of big corporate moves we could see more frequently, whether it's Toyota swallowing a smaller competitor or GM forging partnerships with companies you'd never expect. Because when an automaker has tens of thousands of employees, factories in multiple countries, and ties to local economies, letting it fail outright can cause unemployment spikes and social unrest. It's that too big to fail phenomenon, but in a form that doesn't always get the same press as the banking sector. Stellantis, home to familiar names like Alfa Romeo, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, and Chrysler, is another example. The brand's reliability track record has been harshly criticized, and even their newer lineups still carry the baggage of that bad reputation. Dodge had a surge of interest when muscle cars were all the rage, but as gas prices rose and consumer priorities changed, that boom faded. Jeep might be beloved by a certain kind of off-road enthusiast, but people also talk about how frequently these vehicles break down, or how expensive they can be to maintain. On top of that, Stellantis tried to push more premium trims, turning a mainstream brand into something pricier, an approach that sometimes alienates longtime fans. Meanwhile, the brand's ongoing dance with electrification is riddled with issues. R&D costs are huge, profit margins are slimmer on EVs, and consumer acceptance can be hit or miss if the range isn't competitive or if the charging network is subpar. It's not just about whether a single brand can survive. This entire mess is interconnected with the fortunes of parts suppliers, shipping companies, financial institutions, and the governments that rely on tax revenue from large factories. If any single point in this system collapses, say a big supplier goes bankrupt, halting production lines, it can send shockwaves throughout the entire industry. And this is precisely what keeps some politicians awake at night. Every time you see rumors of a forced merger or a hush-hush bailout talk, you can bet there's an unspoken fear that if these companies topple, they'll take thousands of jobs with them. Are we in the early stages of a massive realignment where a dozen smaller brands vanish or get absorbed, leaving only a few mega conglomerates? But it's not all on the shoulders of dysfunctional corporations or short-sighted executives. The uncomfortable truth is that consumers themselves share some of the blame. For decades, car culture has been shaped by pride, aspirations, and the desire to keep up appearances. Auto ads typically show glamorous lifestyles, scenic roads, or spirited off-roading sessions that rarely align with how people actually use their vehicles. But that marketing works. It plants the idea that a person's identity is bound up in the grille badge and the shape of their fenders. Even those who claim they only want a reliable ride can't fully escape the sense of status attached to their choice of brand or model. Think about it. The flamboyant sports car, the hulking pickup, the luxurious SUV, each one communicates a different lifestyle statement to the world. Social media amplifies this phenomenon. A new car is a surefire way to get instant likes, especially if it's decked out in top-of-the-line trim. So younger buyers, despite being strapped with student loans and bleak job prospects, might dig themselves deeper into debt to drive a vehicle that signals success, even if behind the wheel they feel the monthly payment pinch. This has become especially noticeable with Gen Z, who, according to multiple surveys, disproportionately favor luxury rides. They're still forming their adult identities and see a sleek car as a quick way to project the image they want. Unfortunately, taking on a 7-year loan for a car that might be out of style or lacking modern features halfway through that term is a recipe for constant financial stress. It's a cycle that's impossible to sustain if the economy falters or interest rates spike. And guess what? Both are already happening. Tesla, which once rode a wave of unstoppable hype, is an excellent case study in how quickly brand perception can shift. The moment Elon Musk's personal controversies began overshadowing the cars, Tesla lost some of the luster that had made it an aspirational brand for environmentally conscious and tech-savvy buyers. People who might have considered a Tesla as their first EV started asking themselves if they wanted to be associated with the buzz around Musk's outspoken style. At the same time, new Chinese EVs began hitting international markets, often matching or undercutting Tesla on range and price. Competition is fierce in the EV realm now. Dozens of models from upstart brands offer cheaper or more feature-packed solutions. For many, the name Tesla no longer automatically represents the cutting-edge choice. Yet Tesla's struggles parallel the broader issues across the industry. When an automaker's success depends on high margins, like selling expensive models at scale, any dent in public perception can be devastating. And because the EV market is still young, the rate of change is blisteringly fast. One year's technology can look ancient just 24 months later, making it a tricky space to dominate long-term. Car buyers who can't stomach the price of a new EV or who are spooked by charging infrastructure that's still patchy in many areas might just stick to used gas cars. Ultimately, that slows the turnover of older vehicles and further complicates manufacturing forecasts. The upshot? A bunch of brand new EVs could end up sitting in lots unpurchased, while their manufacturers scramble to figure out how to recoup R&D costs. To add fuel to this chaotic fire, some consumers are starting to pivot away from car ownership altogether. The conversation around walkable cities, improved public transport, or the convenience of ride-sharing has reached a fever pitch, especially among younger demographics. Gone are the days when everyone automatically assumed they needed a personal vehicle by the time they turned 16. Many city dwellers find they can rely on bikes, rideshare apps, or short-term rentals of vehicles for longer trips. Others are moving to areas where a personal car is less of a necessity, deliberately picking walkable neighborhoods or places close to efficient subway or bus lines. This cultural shift runs directly counter to the last several decades of suburban sprawl, and if it continues, the ramifications for car makers are huge. Fewer lifetime buyers, smaller annual sales volumes, and a pressing need to develop new business models, maybe subscription-based car sharing or other services that some brands are tentatively exploring. It's also increasingly common to see families that used to own 2 or 3 cars scaling back to just 1. They might work from home more often or have realized they can live their daily lives with fewer vehicles in the driveway. That single change might not sound dramatic, but on a national scale, it means decreased demand at a time when car makers are desperate to boost sales to pay down their own debts. This is the reality so many manufacturers are waking up to. Not only is there a financing crisis, but a cultural pivot that calls the entire foundation of car ownership into question. It's a double whammy, and the uncertainty about where people will stand on this issue in the next 5 to 10 years is enough to unsettle even the most stoic executives in Detroit, Tokyo, or Stuttgart. From a purely economic standpoint, the underlying data is troublesome. Automakers historically counted on consistent growth, more households, more wealth, more cars. But over the last decade, average wages have stagnated or even fallen in real terms while vehicle prices soared. That pricing mismatch was concealed by low interest rates and creative financing. If you can stretch payments over enough years, monthly costs remain barely within reach, even as total debt balloons. But that trick is only sustainable as long as interest rates stay near historic lows. Now that central banks worldwide are raising rates to combat inflation, those illusions of affordability evaporate. And when people do the math on buying a $50,000 car at 7 or 8% interest, they realize they'd be paying far more than the sticker price by the time the loan wraps up. If the car depreciates faster than the loan balance declines, they end up underwater, stuck with negative equity and no easy way out. In such an environment, brand loyalty also evaporates. If a consumer is going to stretch themselves financially, they might as well try to reach for a brand they perceive as premium. Or at the opposite end, maybe they aim for an ultra cheap alternative just to have something to get around in. This leaves mid-tier brands in a precarious spot. They can't compete on sheer budget value, and they can't justify the high margins of a truly premium product. Instead, they try to dress up mainstream models with fancy features, but that doesn't always convince buyers they're getting real luxury. And if the brand has a tarnished reputation, think reliability nightmares or poor resale values, then good luck persuading debt-weary consumers to sign another 6 or 7 years of their lives away. Another silent killer in this whole equation is the question of maintenance and insurance on modern cars. Vehicles that roll off the line today are packed with sensors, cameras, computers, and sometimes complicated hybrid or electric drivetrains. While these advancements make for a safer and more comfortable ride, they also make repairs exceedingly pricey. A minor fender bender can trigger thousands of dollars in sensor replacements or recalibrations. Insurance companies have taken note, and premiums reflect the risk of having to pay for advanced tech, not just old-fashioned bodywork. For a consumer already tight on monthly budgets, a spike in insurance can be the final straw, and as cars age, expensive specialized parts can become their own form of sabotage. If a certain brand is known for requiring frequent, high-cost repairs, owners might sell or trade in their vehicles earlier, which in turn drives down resale values and tarnishes the brand even more. The average age of cars on the road is hitting record highs, partly because design improvements mean vehicles can last longer, but also because people can't afford to upgrade. A decent 10-year-old car might not have all the modern bells and whistles, but it can still get you to work reliably. So if you're a consumer watching your every penny, why jump into a brand new model with a monstrous monthly payment? This logic is quickly catching on, creating a feedback loop of fewer new car buyers, more intense competition for the limited pool of people willing to make a purchase, and an ever-growing stock of unsold new cars on dealer lots. Meanwhile, the secondhand market may seem robust, but it's driven more by necessity than by the mania we saw during supply shortages. If anything, these are signals that the entire system is overdue for a seismic shift. Rumors and speculation swirl around every corner, especially concerning potential bankruptcies or forced consolidations. It's not just Nissan. Some industry insiders claim Ford, despite ongoing efforts to streamline and cut costs, still faces hidden trouble in its expansive truck and SUV lineup. Others say General Motors is putting too many eggs in the electric basket too soon, risking a major hit if EV sales don't ramp up as expected. Honda, while in better shape than Nissan, grapples with balancing old faithful gas models that consumers still want against progressive hybrid and electric expansions. Then you've got Volkswagen, struggling to atone for past controversies related to emission compliance. In an era of heightened consumer awareness around environmental impact, and with so many new choices entering the EV segment, VW's brand image rehabilitation is an uphill climb. Meanwhile, Chinese automakers BYD, NIO, and XPeng, among others, look poised to flood international markets with cheaper electrics, aided by supportive policies back home. Their success in China is staggering, and they're eyeing global expansion at a pace that alarms legacy car makers. The fear is that American or European firms won't be able to compete on price or battery technology, and once brand loyalty is broken, a Tesla owner switching to a Chinese EV or a longtime Ford driver opting for a new import, the old guard may never win them back. Many analysts think we're witnessing the dawn of a new hierarchy in automotive power. The question is how established brands will respond when faced with nimbler, tech-forward competition that doesn't carry the baggage of older financing and supply chain models. The emotional attachment to cars runs deep though, which is why the rejection of car ownership can feel so shocking to older generations who see it as a rite of passage. For them, a driver's license was the ultimate symbol of teenage freedom, and suburban life all but required a personal vehicle to manage errands and commutes. But we're seeing the conversation shift. On social platforms, you'll find entire communities discussing the merits of living car-free, whether by relocating to a city with robust public transit or by forming a car-sharing collective. They'll compare monthly costs for insurance and maintenance versus the occasional rideshare. And as remote or hybrid work becomes more common, some folks realize they don't need a car at all. They can spend that money on travel, better housing, or other experiences. This ideological change might feel small right now, but as these behaviors normalize, the effect on auto demand could be seismic. When entire cohorts of young professionals decide that they prefer to spend money on experiences or property investments instead of rolling debt on a new sedan, the slow bleed in sales becomes unstoppable. It also carries environmental implications. If fewer people buy cars, there's less pollution, less consumption of raw materials. This can create a virtuous cycle for cities that invest in walkability and public transit, making them even more appealing for newcomers and businesses. Automakers see this trend and scramble to future-proof themselves, some by doubling down on luxury lines for those who can still afford them, others by exploring brand expansions into e-bikes or microcars. It's the Wild West, and nobody's certain which strategy will pay off. Now let's return to the central question. What does it all mean for the future of car-centric lifestyles? If bankruptcies in the automotive sector start popping up, the first casualties are usually workers, factory hands, engineers, and dealership employees. This can devastate entire towns built around those factories. Governments may step in with bailouts or pressure companies to merge. The resulting conglomerates might be stronger on paper, but they often streamline products to reduce competition internally, leaving fewer choices for consumers. Meanwhile, as brands struggle with these transitions, the cost of new cars may keep escalating, especially if supply chain constraints remain in flux. Automakers may decide to focus on fewer models at higher price points, betting that the wealthy segment and corporate fleets will keep them afloat. This is already happening to some degree, but the next phase could be more extreme. Then there's the possibility of a sudden shift in consumer behavior that triggers a cascade effect. Imagine a scenario where, in a single year, millions of people decide a used car or a basic EV is good enough, leaving rows of premium models unsold. Over time, the companies that bet everything on luxury vehicles could face cash flow crises they can't escape. Or conversely, if inflation and interest rates continue to climb, even used cars might become untenable for vast swaths of the population, pressuring governments to invest in better public transport or to incentivize new mobility schemes like citywide e-scooter and e-bike networks. The real question is whether we've already crossed the point of no return, where consumer debt and corporate greed have built up so much pressure that the only outcome is a dramatic reset. Amidst all this tension, there's a fascinating debate about whether the downfall of certain car manufacturers could be a good thing long term. Advocates for more sustainable living argue that forcing the industry to consolidate or face bankruptcy might open the door to greener solutions. When old behemoths are forced to adapt or die, it often sparks innovation. We could see a surge in small, nimble companies that prioritize efficient electric drivetrains, modular components, and subscription-based ownership models. Some might say that's the future anyway, a scenario where you don't necessarily own your car, but subscribe to a mobility service that provides you with exactly the vehicle you need when you need it. It sounds radical to many, but so did the idea of streaming music and movies before those platforms took over. Still, the social costs are substantial. Millions of auto workers and related service employees can't just pivot careers overnight, and entire communities depend on these factories, from the corner diner to the local supply shop that keeps assembly lines running. The potential for a large-scale societal shock is real unless politicians and corporate leaders carefully manage the transition. But careful management is rarely something big businesses are praised for, especially when profits slip. Panic often leads to short-term fixes that don't address structural problems. That's exactly how we ended up with borderline predatory financing and endless new SUV models in the first place. So, will the auto industry learn from the mistakes that got us here? Or will they keep inflating the bubble until it finally bursts? Let's not forget the role of personal identity in all this. For so many people, the car they drive isn't just a metal box on wheels. It's a symbol of status, achievement, or freedom. Dealerships and manufacturers know how powerful that emotional bond can be. That's why so many car advertisements feature scenic overlooks, wealthy-looking families, or rebellious, edgy imagery. It tugs at something deep within us, telling us that we deserve to be seen in a certain light. And in a world where so many feel they'll never own a home or retire comfortably, a nice car might be the one indulgence they can show off. Ironically, it's also the one indulgence that can anchor them to high debt for years to come, preventing them from saving or investing in anything else. But brand perceptions can change overnight. Tesla was once the darling of the eco-conscious crowd. Now, for some, that shine has faded. Nissan was once seen as a quality brand that offered fun performance and robust family vehicles. Today, it's struggling mightily to preserve its legacy. Jeep tried to become a luxury SUV brand while relying on nostalgia for adventure. Now, it faces increased scrutiny over reliability and pricing that veers toward premium territory without delivering premium peace of mind. This same volatility can be found in new Chinese EV brands, which might seem cool and innovative now but could face their own crises if they overextend themselves internationally. In short, brand image is fleeting, and in an era of social media, the narrative can shift in a matter of days. A glimmer of hope can be found in the desire for real solutions. Some automakers are pivoting to smaller, more practical vehicles, though they don't always reach markets that need them most. Others are investing in battery tech that uses fewer costly or conflict minerals, aiming to lower the price of entry-level EVs. More ambitious ideas include designing urban microcars or developing modular platforms that can be cheaply adapted across multiple vehicle types, thus slashing R&D costs. However, these projects run into the complication that most corporate boards want quick returns. They'd rather push a high-margin SUV that sells 100,000 units than a hyper-efficient city car that might only move 20,000. Still, if times get tough enough, necessity may push them into innovative pathways they've ignored before. Sometimes the best breakthroughs are forced by crisis. Yet the automotive sector isn't just a business. It's woven into society and culture in ways that are hard to unravel. America's entire national landscape was shaped by highways, suburban expansion, and the notion that every person should be able to own a car. Other countries too have built roads, neighborhoods, and tourism industries around vehicles. Changing that overnight is impossible. Even if we wanted to adopt a more European-style rail network or drastically expand public bus systems, the infrastructure cost and political hurdles are immense. That's why some predict we'll see a drawn-out period of painful decline, rather than a quick pop of the car bubble. You might witness slow merges, brand dissolutions, or shifts in corporate ownership where new players quietly buy up the old guard. So where does the road lead from here? It's difficult to say there's a single outcome because the auto world is massive and diverse. One brand might innovate and thrive, another might cling to old strategies and perish. Yet one thing is certain, the upheavals we're observing now, fueled by consumer debt, trade wars, a pivot to luxury, EV competition, and changing social attitudes, are not going to resolve cleanly. Major collapses look inevitable, and the fallout could be brutal. Workers stand to lose jobs. Local economies may suffer if factories shut down, and many families could find themselves scrambling to renegotiate car loans they can't afford to pay. Then there's the question of whether any government, no matter how big or resourceful, can bail out or merge every struggling automaker. Perhaps we'll see entire sub-brands vanish, or even iconic names fade into history. At the same time, there's a kind of irony. We collectively caused this mess by placing too much emphasis on what a car says about us, turning it into a status symbol instead of just a tool for transportation. The good news is, if people become more rational and demand truly affordable or reliable cars, or simply choose alternative transport, the market may realign with real-world needs. Or the wealth gap could continue to widen, with some people driving ever more exclusive vehicles while the masses rely on secondhand beaters or public transport. In the end, the world might split into those who can afford personal mobility and those who can't. That's a dystopian scenario, but it's not out of the realm of possibility if these trends go unchecked. No matter how you look at it, the story of the global car industry right now is both thrilling and unsettling. On one hand, we're seeing technology leaps in EVs and autonomous features that could revolutionize how we get around. On the other hand, we're facing the potential downfall of companies that have been household names for generations, all because of tangled financial webs, brand mismanagement, and changing consumer values. As more rumors swirl of bailouts and brand mergers, and as consumers wrestle with massive debts and overpriced vehicles, the entire system teeters. The basic question everyone is asking is, are we near the end of an era defined by mass car ownership and the old school approach to auto finance? Or will a new generation of car companies and mobility services step in to fill the void, ushering in a reinvention that once again captures our imaginations? The immediate future will likely include more headlines about failed deals or last-minute government interventions. You'll hear sensational stories about bankruptcies, recalls, or big lawsuits over shady financing practices. Yet in the midst of that noise, you'll also find genuine innovation, from radical new battery technologies to city designs that eliminate the need for cars altogether. It's going to be a complicated period of upheaval, and none of us will escape the ripple effects, whether that means unexpected costs, job changes, or simply rethinking how we get to work in the morning. The next few years may determine whether the automobile remains the symbol of personal freedom it's been for so long or transforms into something else entirely. Ultimately, it's up to each one of us to decide how we engage with this monumental shift. Will we cling to the old illusions, stepping into loans that chain us to cars we can't afford just to project an image? Or will we demand practical, accessible options and challenge the outdated system that brought us here? One thing is for sure, the automotive world is speeding toward a crossroads, and whichever way it turns could affect everything from local economies to the global environment. The road ahead is paved with uncertainty, but also with the potential for reinvention if consumers, corporations, and governments rise to the occasion.